All right. H for Hustle podcast. Welcome back. We have another great guest today. We have Mike Pachan. I'm not going to say what specific company. I'm going to say he is a cannabis CEO. How about that? Is that a good title?
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Yep.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, and hey, thank you for having me and thank you to all the folks listening right now. I always appreciate the time. I know time's valuable. So looking forward to making this an inspirational and educational 30 to 45 minutes.
Cool. All right. So if I was to meet you, I guess at a Zoom dinner right now, right? Like what what would you say you do for a living?
Yeah, so if someone, says, Mike, what do you do for a living? I say I'm professional at being myself. I've spent the past 11 years in the cannabis hemp space, hustled it out working for other people's companies for 5 years. Now I'm the owner operator of one successful company that's been allowing my wife and I to keep a roof over our heads for 6 years. And we've invested some other money into another startup. That should pop in 2021, and we're already eyeballing our third opportunity to bootstrap another business in another industry off the ground. So just I tell people I hustle for a living, and if they get that, they get it.
If they
If
don't,
not,
then
I
that's it.
kind of change subjects and just whatever's most comfortable for them to talk about.
The blanket thing you could say is I'm an entrepreneur and just kind of keep it simple.
Yeah. Although, today, especially with social media, so many people are self-grandizing that,
Yeah,
entrepreneur is sort of the in word. And I tell people, take a look at my LinkedIn. You don't even see cannabis or hemp in the profile. I
yeah.
rarely talk about it. And man, I let, the chit chatters chit chat and you know how it is, Jerome. You just keep your nose on the grindstone and keep that hustle. So.
Got it. So when people hear cannabis, they think, man, this guy, this must be the greatest industry ever. How did you get started in the cannabis industry? Let's go back a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
what was your start in the cannabis industry?
A bit of a fluke. I grew up in Ohio and I was in pharmacy school for my first 3 years and actually got kicked out of pharmacy school. I was at a concert with some buddies and I had about a half gram of weed, which is about the size of your thumbnail, in my pocket. Was arrested in Indiana. They took it very seriously.
Wow.
Yeah, 12 months of probation with 6 months of jail time on the line. I'll be 100% honest. I sort of bought my way out of that charge. I was in college, working on being college educated. The judge didn't really want to interrupt that, but he hammered me with some hard probation. I moved home, finished up in business school, kind of got a little out of control. I was a little depressed. I fought some substance abuse, kind of got it back together. Went to work for a small business right out of college, learned a lot, had a blast for 3 years. And a buddy called me, and at the time I was reading the self-help books like the Deepak Chakra, and the
Yeah.
Manifest and the Dial in Your Universe. And, it was kind of working. I lived in Atlanta, so, I was getting back to church and just getting better habits.
Got it.
But what I was learning is trust your gut. And I'd always worked for small businesses, so I just had I had a wild side,
Okay.
there's no doubt about that. So when my buddy called me and said, hey, I was in Telluride, Colorado, a little tiny ski town, and they just posted a sign that said, "As assistant manager needed at the ski shop." I said, well, I'm going to try this Manifest stuff. I'm going to Google Telluride, and if it pops up and my gut feeling says go, I'm going to go. And it did. So I
Gotcha.
resigned, packed a U-Haul, moved out to Telluride, spent
Just
the
like
first,
that. There was
just like
your
that.
gut
Yeah.
said go, so you went.
Yeah. And I was like, if I'm practicing this, working on faith, and faith is challenging your beliefs, then I have to get started, in this process. And that was 2009. I had company cars, cell phone, they were paying part of my rent, 401k, health insurance. It was nice. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't lifting me up.
And what kind of work was that?
It was cool. It was sales. They were
Okay.
a packaging company, flexible packaging. So, I was a terrible salesperson at that point. I just didn't get it. But I saw a lot of cool small businesses, and I think part of our conversation today is just know at what point on your path you're on. I was not at a point in my path where I was ready to be a small business owner. I was in that discovery phase.
Got it.
Like if you look at like court processes or a lawsuit, you have a discovery phase, which is where all the evidence comes out.
Yeah.
So I was in a point in my life path where it was evidence coming to me saying, look, this guy does serpentine belts for the military. This guy does soap for hotels. this gal or guy does this, that. And I saw all this, meat packing to all these ways these small business owners were doing $1 million plus a year and just
And,
loving life.
and this is when you were in Colorado, so you saw these
No,
people.
so pre-Colorado. This
Okay,
was so when I sold packaging, I lived in Atlanta and I covered 8 states. So I just drove loops around the South in my
got
car.
got it.
And it was discovery. I had worked and grown up in small businesses in Ohio, but this is pre-internet. This is where you had to go to the library and open a book. So my exposure to the amount of people who made their own living was limited to the boss I worked for at the greenhouse growing up,
Yeah,
my Uncle Vic, and my Uncle Mike, architect, construction business, greenhouse owner. That was 3 people out of the couple hundred people I was surrounded by.
yeah,
So I didn't have that exposure level. Like you log on to LinkedIn nowadays, everyone's an entrepreneur,
yeah,
right? It's saturated. So it feels easy. Back then, so
yeah. It
that
wasn't the
discovery
same.
thing,
Yeah, I definitely
it
understand what you mean
wasn't.
by that because you were only
Yeah,
limited by the people you knew and the influence you had. You might have known them, but how much time are you really spending with them is at that as well.
100%.
So
So
when
I
you were
kind of
traveling
saw,
around, you were seeing these,
yeah,
you were selling flexible packaging. So you started seeing these business owners and what they were
right.
able to accomplish. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
and it was so interesting because I saw them as integrating work and lifestyle and having it be one. There's people putting in 15 to 18 hours at the factory, but they loved it because it was their factory, it was their machines, it was their team, it was their little universe that they had created, and it made a living for them. And I was just so intrigued by it that I kept hearing over and over again. It was all about risk rewards. So when my phone rang and my buddy was like, you don't sound happy in Atlanta. I think you're over that phase in your life. Take this risk. I instantly jumped on it because
Got
my
it.
gut said go.
So you
So
landed,
I
you
went.
landed Telluride now, right? You're in the ski
Yeah.
town. You're a
Yep.
ski instructor. What are you doing for work?
Yeah, so I worked at a high volume rental store. I had snowboarded a little bit growing up. I hadn't in 8 years. I was pretty physically fit growing up in college with the substance abuse. I gained a bunch of weight. I lost 40 pounds between college and going to Atlanta. So I was kind of getting back into my own self.
Got
And
it.
what Telluride gave me is I really found my own self. I love being fit. I love working with my hands. I kind of got back to my roots a little bit in
Got it.
Telluride, although, I did also get back into the substance abuse, but that's a core theme in my story because it kept that wild side going. I'm, 5 years without any hard drugs at this point, which I'm super thankful for. But that wild side, I knew instinctively that I had to embrace for a certain period of time because when the cannabis industry first started, it wasn't cool. It didn't pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was still legal-ish, but no one really knew it was. So you had to be kind of wild and crazy. Like fast forward 3 years into the cannabis space, and I'm single trying to date in Denver. No one wanted to date someone that was in the cannabis scene
Because
because
it's technically illegal, right?
it was goofy.
Yeah.
People were like, grow up, and I was like, no, again, deferring to that gut feeling that said, hold true to who you are now and let it evolve into who you're about to become. What you're doing right now is right. So I did, but I got to
So
tell you,
so
and
when
I
you're a
was,
ski instructor, how do you get to the cannabis?
assistant manager at
Okay.
a rental store.
Okay, sorry. So you're assistant manager. How
Yeah.
do you get into cannabis from there? Is it someone introduced you at the shop?
Right. So I'm going through this crazy experience that winter in Telluride, and it's all these freewheeling people, and we're having a ton of fun, a
Yeah.
ton of fun. And I'm still reading the self-help books, and I'm manifesting and doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden the brakes go on, and winter's over. It's off season.
Yeah.
Most people aren't employed. I had really not saved a whole lot of money. I was, and I was like, okay. So I literally said, I'm going to put my headphones on and I'm going to walk around town and I'm going to manifest a job for the summer. And I'm going to trust in all this stuff I'm being told I'm supposed to believe. I'm going to test it
Yeah.
and find my faith in it. Walked up the street, made it about a block and a half up. A door swung open. It hit me. It literally hit me. And
Wow.
this big hillbilly looking fella slapped a hand wrote sign on the door that said, Coca Pelli Wellness Dispensary open tomorrow. And I said, whoa, cool. You're opening a dispensary tomorrow? He's like, yeah, what are you doing? I was like, I'm trying to manifest a job. And he's like, well, I got a bunch of stuff to unload. I'll pay you $100. Help me unload my truck. So I unloaded his truck, but I always put in extra work. So I started to unpack the boxes. I started to plug the computers in. I started to ask him how all this medical marijuana stuff worked. And we are going to dial into a doctor. So I said, well, let me call the doctor's office and test pilot the system. And it did. And I got approved for my medical card that night, walked down to the post office, mailed it, came back. And he's like, oh, you got a brain. He said, do you know people in town? I said, I know a decent amount of people. I've made a pretty good name for myself this winter. He said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I don't know. He said, I'll pay you $10 an hour. Come run my shop.
Wow.
Boom.
And
There's
just
my
like
job.
that, manifested a job, walked right into the cannabis industry.
Literally, risk reward, man. I took a walk.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that's it.
So you get in now, you're working at this dispensary and so you're learning the business as you're doing it pretty much.
Totally.
So you're learning the retail side of it. So you're learning to speak to vendors, call manufacturers. How are you learning the business from there?
Yeah. So you're like 5 years ahead.
Oh,
so
wow.
at this
Okay.
point, we were vertically integrated and we had a legal grow in a house down the street. It was an old house. And at that point, the state was like, because the state didn't really know what they were doing. So not only were we creating an industry, we were regulating ourselves. We were all just figuring it out.
Got it.
So we had a legal road down the road and he kind of handled more of the grow. But at night, I'd run down and help trim weed. But my main focus was retail. There were vendors, but a lot of these people were cooking up edibles in their house. And technically it was still legal then. So I was slowly just kind of tinkering with what medical marijuana was, what the industry was, how it's all going to go. We had a pretty successful run, but there were, I got paid every 2 weeks and there were times where, he had to pull cash out of the register because there was no money in the bank account.
Yeah. And then you can't really technically have a bank account because it's still semi-legal, not legal, right? So
yeah, and even to this day, it's hard to get bank accounts. So it was, you were kind of in free fall the whole time, figuring it out on a limited time on the way down. My parents came out to visit me that summer. I told them I was doing lawn and landscape. They kind of knew I was lying. We didn't really get into it, because again, I had this wild man side where at this point I'd been arrested like 8 times in my 20s.
Wow.
So my parents are like, what is he doing?
Yeah. Now he's messing with semi-legal drugs.
Right. And they didn't even know that by the time they flew me home that Christmas. So I had gotten into it in April and we sat down Christmas morning and had a talk. And by that point, I kind of had an understanding of what the industry was. And they were like, look, if this is what you want to do, we'll support it. We don't get it, but we'll support it. And I thought that was cool. But, that first 3 to 5 years, I mean, I had friends that would use, the word loser. Like, you're kind of a loser. Like, you're coming into your 30s. You're not making a whole lot of money. You have no 401k. Like, what is PTO? I don't know.
Yeah.
And my
meanwhile, they have these super standard lives. You're in an industry that's like wild west at this point. It's not regulated. It's like just everyone's figuring out as they go. And you have to deal with the embarrassment of that, right? Like
it is embarrassing.
You're like, there's something here, and they're like, nah, you're just a loser. You just want to smoke pot all day long, right?
Totally.
So,
and I love smoking pot all day long, but I also love working really hard. So it was like this great combination.
Yeah. This dispensary you're working for, and it is vertically integrated. So they have a grow house. They're growing and selling at almost in the same location. Does that company grow? Where does that?
No. So they ended up selling to a company in Denver. I transitioned out of Telluride because it was just too wild and crazy. And that's kind of when I started my path to better lifestyle, which took several years to accomplish. But I was like, I got to get out of here. Come to Denver, thought I had a surefire thing with the company they sold to. Well, little do I know that company thinks the guy who sold them the business is a total idiot. So every time I keep showing up like, hey, it's Mike from Cocapelli, they were telling everyone on their team, do not let him in the door.
Got it. Because you're attached to that guy and his systems and everything else.
So I tell people, I've tried to get out of the industry a dozen times and it keeps sucking me back in. So there I am for weeks walking around Denver trying to find work. And this was before Denver really exploded. I couldn't find a job.
Yeah.
So finally, after about 8 weeks of making no income, and again, I have no money, I'm down like $150 in my bank account. My phone rings. And the trim manager from that company calls me. Hey, I got people hungover. I need you in here to trim. I heard you want to work. Okay, great. So I ride my bike down because I couldn't afford gas. And I trim for, I'm in there 2, 3 days. One of the owners comes walking by and in front of me screams, "Who is this? I told him to never be in here ever again. Get out." And the trim manager's like, he works really hard. He hasn't even said a word in 3 days. All he's done is trim. I don't even think he's ate or drank water. He said, "Get out." He said, "I'm going to put this stipulation on you." This was right as the regulations had changed and you had to go through a background check to get a badge to work
Yeah.
in the industry. Kind of like you have to get in Vegas to deal blackjack. They want to know who you are.
Yeah.
Well, no one was going to get them. The process was weird. I got 8 arrests. They want to know every deposition and everywhere you've lived and every bank. It's a lot of paperwork.
Wow.
So the owner thinks he's got me because no one on his team is taking the time to do it. He said, "You can never come back unless you get your badge." I took my last $150, invested 4 days at time. I didn't have a computer at the time. I was using the local library's computer and Kinko's to get faxes and depositions sent and going through
Wow.
my entire record
So
of
you're
where
like
I've ever
jumping through the
lived,
loops. You're
jumping
jumping
through
through.
massive loops. And at that time, you were signing off on a contract telling the IRS that they had permanent access to all your financial records. You
Wow.
were telling the FBI through fingerprints and signing off on this document saying you are more than welcome to go through my entire life. I waive all my rights so I can have this badge. And I inked it, spent $75, went down to the horse track where they're processing the paperwork. There's a line because everyone's scrambling because there's a deadline. I was polite to the lady in charge and she expedited my application and handed me the badge the next day.
Wow. So
So
did
I
you go
called the
back?
trim manager. Yeah. And I go, "I got my badge. I need to work. Like I have now like $25, $30 left. I'm broke. I'm living on my brother's couch. I'm living out of a suitcase. I'm depressed because I like to work and I'm going nowhere in life."
Yeah.
And he said, "Come on." So I went down, kept trimming with
Uh-huh.
my little badge on and all the other team members, and they're all close. It's like a little kind of almost
Click.
drug dealer family that they had brought together to be legal.
Yeah.
Owner walks in the door, and I'm like, "Oh man, here we go." So I just keep my head down, trimming. He sees my badge, screams at the rest of the team that they're all fired in 2 days if they don't step it up like Mike and go get their stuff together and get their badge. And I just kept my mouth shut and
Just
just
kept
kept
it cutting.
trimming. And before you know it, the opportunities just, came together. Someone else was hungover and didn't show up. So they asked me to, they wanted me gone so bad that they would make me scrub buckets, scrub floors, clean out spider webs, and you know what? I kept my mouth shut and worked.
Yeah.
Finally, someone didn't show up for their retail. They throw me up there. I like double, tripled their sales in 2 days. The owner comes flying out and he's screaming at me, "Why didn't you tell me you were good with people in retail?" I said, "I've been saying it for months. You've had me in the warehouse scrubbing floors because you don't like me." He said, "You're now running retail and you're going to open a new shop for us in a couple of days."
Really? So he
Yeah,
went from
man.
completely hating you to putting you in charge of a new shop.
Hated me. So that's where I found my niche is I opened a shop. I taught people all that I had learned about how to interact with customers, how to not overpromise cannabis, how to build systems, how to be professional, how to push all the paperwork. And we had a very successful shop.
Got it.
So my
So,
first 5 years, that was kind of my niche, was helping people streamline what
your
at that
shop.
point were really just kind of drug dealing operations to like professional entities.
Got it. And this is all the stuff that you learned from your previous boss that they hated and thought was a complete moron.
Yeah, because he just let me be, and I just kind of, because I like to work hard and I like things to make sense, and it's like my mom did a great job raising us. Where if you're gonna have friends over, you had to clean the house
Yeah.
and get snacks out and make sure they took their shoes off and like introduced them to mom and dad. So we had a protocol.
Yeah.
So I just put protocols into place in these dispensaries, and at that time they were patients, medical patients. They loved it. So that's
Got
what
it.
I did for a few years is I went to other companies and helped them build new operations
Got
out.
it. So
Now you call it consulting. Back then you were just a manager.
so did people did your name start getting out like, hey, this guy really helped me boost my sales, or just people started meeting you in the
Yeah,
dispensaries?
not really. I mean, I kind of just kept to myself because I wanted my own thing. And what happened is just kind of organically through the mix, I had met vendors and met
Got
cultivators,
it.
and I just
Okay.
kind of knew people. So when I started the wholesale in year 5, people were like, "Oh, I remember you. You're a nice guy. If you say this flower is good, I'm assuming it is, and you'll probably get the job done." That's when we started the wholesale firm. And what wholesaling is you're like a retail broker where someone has surplus product and someone needs it. It's all above board, and you're managing the deal. You're making sure what they say they have it's worth this price. They'll pay you. All the paperwork will exchange.
And you're the
And
intermediary in between both.
totally, yeah. So
Got it.
from 2015 through 18, we grew it to like a 15-person company with like 65 million in sales in 3 years.
So what made you start that? Because you were doing, managing retail shops. Did you see an opportunity to say, okay, this is where I can position myself within the industry? Like,
Yeah,
what was the thing
yeah.
that you saw that made you start that company?
I did. I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of failure too, and a lot of people who had brilliant ideas that just turned out to be money pits. And I was just kind of watching the industry move around and what I wanted out of my role. And that's the hard part about small business is what you think you're going to do today probably won't be what you're successful
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
So letting go and allowing that idea to grow into what it should be. I mean, look at Dyson. Like he wanted to just sell his idea to a vacuum cleaner
Manufacturer.
manufacturer. Well, he never really wanted to make his own vacuums until like 50 people told him no.
Yeah.
And then he was like, all right, I don't want to just be an engineer. I want to be the manufacturer.
Yeah, and then that's how things kind of took off from him. So you found an opportunity. You saw where, because of other people's failure, you saw, okay, wholesaling is my niche, my inside space. And you took that from zero, and you had business partners at the time, or was it just you?
I did. I had one. We kind of came together. We split in 2018. So I
Okay.
currently have, I do that same business model independently right now.
Got it. Okay.
I don't want to scale it back up because, again, I want to look at other opportunities to scale. But yeah, in 3 years, I mean, we crushed it.
Got
We
it.
crushed it.
And then the business at that point, also the cannabis business in Denver also started to mature a little bit as
Yeah.
well. So then there were better regulations, better laws, better rules, everything. So you were
And
able
we
to.
went recreational. That was the big step was in 2014, they were like, okay, now you can go recreational. So by 2015, the rec market was booming. More independent cultivators were coming online. You didn't have to be vertically integrated. So just standalone dispensaries no longer had to grow to just pull cannabis from.
Got it.
So the opportunity had opened up, the markets bloomed, regulation was in place, and it was just the perfect time.
Got it. So you go from a guy who's has $150 in his pocket, right?
Yeah.
Grinded it out. You made some money. You started working. Now you're running a business, and in 3 years, you guys are operating at $65 million. Was that mind blowing for you?
Yeah, but now just keep in mind, I just want to clarify that number. That's 65 million in sales. So if a pound of marijuana costs $2,000
Yeah.
for us to sell, and we took $100 a pound, our top line revenue went from like 350 to 1.01 million to 2.5 million.
Got it. So that's what.
In that we sold 65 million, and that's wholesale value. If you
Got it.
multiply
Okay.
that by 3, that's retail value.
Got it. Okay. Got it. So
Yeah,
but you're making a good living for yourself at this
we
point.
were killing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you guys broke up the business. So what happens next after that?
Yeah, so I had to, take a year, and I stayed in it, but I had to stay in it in a certain capacity because I did have a contract. And
Mm-hmm.
then after that, now I'm a free agent, so I'm just doing whatever I want. We were representing 55, 60 cultivators with 250 buyers. Now I represent 2 cultivators with 55 buyers. So it's scaled down a little bit, but it allows my wife and I mean, I'm still a 6-figure earner all day long.
Yeah.
But it's allowed us to reinvest money into Mountain Made CBD. We're a year and a half into that project. Our SEO's pumping. We should see enough internet sales in 2021 to also step into co-manufacturing opportunities. And
Hmm.
once that's up and running and solid, I'll be honest, I might go get my CDLs and start dabbling in the freight industry next.
Wow. Okay. So hold on.
Yeah,
You went really
yeah,
fast. I
yeah, yeah.
want to kind of unpack that a little bit. So, how I know you is because the Mountain made CBD.
Yeah.
What's the big craze with CBD? You go to a gas station, everything has CBD in it. Like, what's the
Yeah.
thing with CBD? I know it's because it's legal across every state in the United States, but what makes CBD such a good product, and why is there such a craze with it right now?
Yeah, I'll be honest, most CBD is garbage. Let's start there,
Oh,
right? And I
really?
always think, yeah, I think that's a fair way to start because when I would have people come into the medical marijuana dispensaries, the first thing I wanted my team to tell them is, I have seen this not work as many times as I have seen it work.
Okay.
Even the playing field, let people make their own decision. Do not feed them placebo effect.
Mm,
Right? So I like to start CBD conversations out with most of it's garbage. And the reason I say that is you're actually seeing a big decrease and a muck up in the marketplace. It's all backed up from production to sales, especially with COVID, because people got into it and thought they could sell low dose products with poor delivery systems, i.e., tincture,
yeah.
and the market was running away because it was new and people thought it was a cure all. What ends up, a lot of the products are snake oil. So the market's taking a beating right now. It's in its second wave of maturity.
Got
Now,
it.
let me tell a backstory. Think of soda or cereal. When cereal first emerged, people don't realize the average diet for most Americans and Europeans was protein, meat. So their bellies weren't really in good health. People weren't really crushing vegetables, fruit and vegetables, because you
Yeah.
couldn't grow them, store them, and ship them. But right, you could run outside and kill a deer and eat the deer.
Yeah.
So people had pretty bad dietary habits, and constipation was a thing. When cereal came about and soda, they didn't hadn't matured into what we know cereal and soda as. People saw a market, but then the snake oil salesman stepped in, and cereal was going to save your life, and soda was this great
Yeah.
tonic, and it was going to make you 6 feet tall. The market exploded. People got wealthy off the snake oil, but then the consumers caught up and the markets tanked.
Got
Cereal
it.
and soda went from really high earning products to low earning, and then no one wanted in
Yeah.
until the people who saw what those products really were kept the train going.
Hmm.
And they were like, look, cereal is how you start your day. It
Yeah.
has nutrients, it's fun, it gets food in your belly. And then the market reemerged into its phase two growth with stability because all the snake oil claims
Oh,
had
it's got out
gone
of the.
away.
Yeah, got it.
We're in that same phase with CBD. People crushed it selling snake oil. The market's kind of fallen apart. And now it's reemerging because people ask questions like you did, which is, why do I even want this? And tell me some truth. What dose should I be taking? What
Yeah.
delivery system should I have? When do I use it? All these smart questions that consumers now want. The
Yeah.
snake oil hoorah of CBD is over. It's
Got it.
over.
So now the customer and the consumer is really educated. And if you can't educate them or tell them what's the benefit in it, they're definitely not going to work with your product.
Totally.
So the
Yeah.
companies like Charlotte's Web, who's been a part of the growth from very, very early, they're primed in position because they weren't never selling snake oils to begin with.
I, I don't want to get myself into legal trouble here. I'll
Okay.
say anyone who is selling a low dose tincture was selling snake oil.
Got it. Okay.
Um,
So what
CBD
is fifth?
has some wonderful benefits, but CBD isn't going to make you 6 feet tall. It's
Yeah.
not going to cure your cancer. It's not going to eliminate your anxiety. It's a tool. And if you use the tool correctly and create a lifestyle involving cannabis, hemp, or cannabinoids, you're probably going to have a better lifestyle. But for someone to say full spectrum oil does this, that, and the other, I can counter that and say, show me what part of that full spectrum oil is doing that, and they don't have an answer.
Got it.
I've
Yeah.
seen cannabis cure tumors, and I've seen cannabis not
Cure
cure
tumor.
tumors.
Yeah.
We don't have a scientific reason on who, what, why, when. What we have is people selling every bit of the plant they can and hoping it works. And if it doesn't, man, they took you for your $100.
Yeah. And they took you for a ride.
Things right now, people don't know. The reason we use CBD isolate, just one thing, CBD and not broad spectrum, full spectrum, is it at least gives you a baseline to start. We're moving our products into a cool process called brain mapping, where they hook you up to these electrodes
Yeah.
and it reads your brain before and after the CBD, and it's consistently showing that it's clearing out the prefrontal cortex, getting rid of brain fog, increasing focus, drive, and healthy energy, not caffeinated energy. Well, if CBD, 99.9% pure CBD, does that to you today, it'll do that to you tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Now we know what high dose CBD does, so we can direct our market and our customer base on how to use that correctly. Then we can build from there.
So is that why you got in with, into the CBD market? Because you saw what people were doing. They were selling low dosage. And what is considered low dosage to you? 50 milligrams
to us,
lower?
It's anything under 25 milligrams.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because I was thinking like 50 milligrams or lower. So 25 and lower is pretty much, if you see something that says 15 milligrams, it doesn't make sense to even buy it.
In my opinion, no, because then you have bioavailability issues. You're not getting that whole 15 milligrams. And if you're not using your delivery system appropriately, you're getting even less.
Got it.
Science out of Israel is saying therapeutic dose for anxiety is 300 milligrams. They're saying therapeutic dose for autism is 300 to 600 milligrams.
Yeah. Got it. So
time and time again.
Got it. So when you got in, you saw an opportunity where you can provide the customer base with a proper CBD, the proper dosage, and a very, very clear product line.
Yeah, and to be honest, we're the Dyson of the CBD realm. No one wants a bagless vacuum right now, because everyone's like, oh, CBD oil, CBD oil. Hey, if you call the pizza shop and you love pizza and you order a pepperoni pizza and every time they deliver it, it's wrong, it's not pepperoni, how many times would you buy that pizza? Never again.
Maybe once. That's it.
Right. When you buy CBD oil, you don't understand what other cannabinoids or terpenes are in that oil, because the person who sold it to you doesn't understand that. They're selling you a different product every time. That's why when you go to the gas pump and you put 85 regular in your car, you know what you're getting. Because when petroleum first boomed, people are watering it down and putting kerosene and all kinds of weird stuff in their gas and telling you it was gas. It wasn't gas. That's why things are regulated.
Got it.
If CBD oil was regulated right now, 99% of the companies would be out of business, because they wouldn't be able to provide you with a consistent product.
So do you see regulation coming sometime soon? That's why you want to get into the market? Or do you see a lot of self-regulation happening?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, if we self-regulate, people will leave us alone. I just think the consumers and the customers need to do, people for some reason with cannabis and hemp, it's like they love to listen to fairy tales and they run after it. And man, if I had a nickel for every person who walked into a dispensary and said, my buddy grows the best weed ever, I would be retired on a yacht, and the yacht's name would be called Nickels. Like, your buddy doesn't grow good weed. You don't have a guy who's got a guy. Yeah. Like, it's fantasy. Go put it on your Instagram and your LinkedIn and live in your fantasy. Like, I know what good weed is, and so do a lot of people out here in California and Colorado. Yeah. It's fairy tale. Your homie doesn't make the best brownies in the world. The science says all you have to do is throw weed and butter and turn it on low, and bam, there's your brownies.
Yeah, exactly.
And who follows that process makes the same cool guy brownie that everyone else does. But everyone likes to highlight that. It has a romance behind it.
Yeah.
So as soon as the customer base catches up to like this fairy tale that they've been told, the bagless vacuum, aka CBD tablets, high dose tablets, is gonna pop off.
Got it.
Banked our entire success of our company off that premise. And I'm telling you, these are R&D samples. 250 milligrams CBD tablet.
Wow.
25 milligrams CBD tablet with vitamin A, C, D3, E, and zinc. 25 milligrams CBD tablet with 150 milligrams of elderberry. I ate one of each.
Wow. So
300 milligrams of CBD. I'm hauling butt right now. So
where you
my
see...
brain is so full of food, it's feeding my brain all day.
So where do you see the CBD market going? Is more into the tablet side and more as a additive, almost like a vitamin in a sense, to add to your body?
Just better delivery systems. Tincture, where you put it under your tongue. If you don't hold it under your tongue for a full 45 seconds, you're getting less than 6% of your dose. It's a garbage delivery system?
Got
Why do you
it.
think Big Pharma doesn't ship drugs in tincture?
Yeah.
Why do you think tincture is no longer on the shelves in the cannabis space? It's garbage. Vape pens are great. Transdermal patches are great. Lotion, salves, balms are great. Tablets are great.
Yeah.
Smokable hemp is great.
Great. Yeah.
Tincture's garbage.
Okay.
You got
Got
hosed if you bought tincture.
got it. Okay. That's good to know because the audience needs to like understand that. So thanks for saying that. And your third business that you're thinking about starting is what? Because you went from wholesaling, now
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
what's
my
this?
buddy was telling me about freight, and apparently there's consistent lack in freight drivers. I love to drive. I drive a lot for work. I think that trucks and warehouses are cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I may invest some money into my CDLs, and I might start to drive 2 days a week to just get eyes on the freight industry. One, because I think it's cool to drive around all the time. I already do it, but in a Subaru.
Yeah.
Two, when the federalization of cannabis comes, people are going to be moving a ton of product around. I already know the industry, and if I know how to drive a truck, there might be a match. Otherwise, I just think it's a cool prospect.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think that, expanding out into another industry is a good hedge.
so, previous guest, she is owner of like 17 trucks,
Oh,
and
sweet.
she's in Texas, and it's massive business. So it's a huge business, and she's like, there's so much room for growth within that space because if you think about it, look at someone like Amazon. They're getting into the logistic business, they're getting into the freight and the moving business because they want to control all their deliverables. And if you see the federalization of cannabis happening, the delivery business on that is going to get massive as well. So if you're early in that, it's huge business. Um,
What episode was that? I'd like to give
um,
it a listen. Do you know offhand or her name, and I'll
yeah,
search it?
I'll give me a second. I can let you know. Let me just pull up the website. I'm looking
And
right now.
again, how cool is it for her to have identified that niche? 17 trucks is what a
Yeah.
success story. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's killing. She's doing a great job, and she's moving like food and stuff and some oil because she's in Houston.
Yeah.
But for the most part, right now is a lot of food. And then through the coronavirus, her business was booming because stores and supermarkets were just going. Her name is Erica Williams. It's episode number. What number is this? Jeez. Why am I losing it? I'm on my website. That's why. Oh,
Yeah.
Erica Williams. Yeah. So she also uses YouTube to build her business
Cool.
as well. So just look out that
I'll
she's
listen to that
yeah,
today.
because she's like it's a huge business and she's made a ton of money in it and she's continuing to grow. And she's like, this is one of the easiest things to get into because she's like a license is not that hard to find, drivers not that hard, and to get a truck is relatively
Yeah.
easy. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah.
See,
So
because I'm kind of wondering, like, so now that I have a small business and a small startup,
yeah.
I'm sitting here, I constantly challenge myself, like, what is my niche? Like, you look at some people who've just crushed with one core business, but then, I listen to, I can't read out of a book and learn.
Yeah.
I can't have to
You
be
and I are the
hands-on.
same. I have to either just do it or like learn in osmosis, like being around it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
being around it because I wanted to get into investing.
Yeah.
Well, all my buddies, they started shipping me books and I opened to page one and I put them down. I've never got like investing. You have to sit there and read reports. Not
Yeah.
for me, but I do listen to an investment podcast because I think the language is interesting. The point I'm telling this story is they had one fella on who crushed it, is a billionaire. His niche is that he's never owned anything ever. He's always just entered into agreements with other people who own businesses. And I wish I could explain this a little better. I can't. It's a quick story. The point is, he's the only one of his kind that's ever made $1 billion doing that. He did something different. So now I'm looking at myself and I'm like, gosh, I love wholesaling. I love the CBD realm. I'm super interested in freight. Maybe my niche is like 10 micro businesses.
Yeah,
And I'm
or
not the guy or gal who does one big business. Maybe
yeah.
I'm the fella that has 15 small things going on.
Yeah, and then one holding company that owns all that, and then
Totally.
eventually somebody could come in and say, "I want the whole
The whole
portfolio."
thing.
There goes 200 million, and you're free and clear. Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah,
a great point. I gotta ask a question because I know my audience is gonna be asking. So
sure.
right now, somebody's they're hearing this, they love pot, they want to get into the cannabis industry. What is the first steps you would say somebody right now if they want to get in the cannabis industry? They're not in the state that's regulated yet, but how would you get them to get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way, but I'll say this because it was my way, so it makes sense to me, is just getting boots on the ground. I don't think that there's any more value than boots on the ground. I'm interested to listen to Erica's podcast because it sounds like she started with a truck, right? Getting boots on the ground and doing something super simple like learning is a lost art. We're also accustomed to, rather than save money, apply for a credit card and buy the $500 thing that we wanted and then pay it off. The art of learning and waiting is, seems antiquated at this time. I don't do social media anymore. I've been off since April because I just don't want to be in the panic of everything.
Yeah.
But like, let's say I was still on social media, I could go and change my profile to expert billionaire CEO, and 1,000 people would believe it. And I would get the gratification of people thinking I'm in, it's like the Peter Griffin where he's like a space cowboy astronaut, in the episode where he's three different things, but he's none of them.
Yeah.
Just getting involved. If you like weed, get into weed. If you're into tech, start, looking at any of the weed tech companies. Go volunteer for free or work for $10 an hour or have a side job. Just get into it so you have a placeholder
Yeah.
and you're into it, and then slowly let it evolve. Please do not just run out to LinkedIn and make yourself a CEO of some company that doesn't really even exist. It's so played out and everyone's just over it. Just get involved as a humble employee. Go ride your bike to work. And
Yeah.
every time you're riding your bike to work, think in your head how bad this sucks. And that's all right during your entrepreneurial path to have things not be okay and to be negative. Don't
Hmm.
positivity wash everything. It sucked riding my bike to work. I was
Hey,
30 years old and I couldn't afford gas. That's not cool. There's nothing to be positive about. The positivity in that situation is I had 20 minutes to repeat in my head, this is not okay and I want more, and I'm going to show up to work today and work for it.
got
And
it.
told myself that for 20 minutes, riding my bike as a 30-year-old to work until I accomplished what I kept repeating in my head. It's okay to not be satisfied with where you're at. That's okay, but just get a boot or a toe on the ground and just start
Got it.
working into it. There's plenty of space. There's plenty of opportunity. You don't have to rush in and do the same thing everyone else is doing because it's done a million times over. Find something that either doesn't work or no one's thinking about and just start there. Find a niche that
Yeah.
you're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's such solid advice. Like a buddy of mine, he's in New Jersey. I live in Jersey, and he does graphic designs for cannabis companies. So he went to school. His trade is graphic design, and he just loves the cannabis space. So he's just been doing like freelance after freelance, free things, and now that New Jersey just became legal recreational, he's primed to be in a great space with all these companies coming in. So you gave some very solid advice. Get boots on the ground, try, and you might already have a skill that can, um, you know, accompany the new spaces of going into cannabis. Because again, as each state opens up, it becomes the wild wild west all over again in each
Yep.
state. So and
Yeah.
there's opportunities to grow within all those industries.
Two brands that I really look up to for how they promoted themselves is Red Bull and Lil Wayne.
Yeah.
Red Bull, their whole theory was if we walk around and hand out free Red Bull, it'll make us more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
if we put a ton of money into an event and hand out free Red Bull, you'll connect the Red Bull
to
with the
the
triple backflip on the snowmobile,
Yep.
which will inspire you to drink Red Bull and ride your own snowmobile. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Lil Wayne went around and made mixtape after mixtape after it never sold them. And people at that time didn't do that. And they kept saying, why are you giving your stuff away for free? He said, I'm not. I'm building a following.
Yeah, and then the more and more and the more and more, it just grows and grows. Funny you
So
say that about
smart.
Red Bull, because the first time I was ever introduced to them, I grew up riding BMX, as this gnarly scar comes from.
Yeah.
I was at a skate park and they were doing some sort of jam. The Red Bull's little Mini Coopers came out and they were just giving like as much as you want. We drank them. We were
Right.
like, this stuff is great. We just kept on drinking all day long. And I was like, where can they buy it? It's like, it's going to be available soon. And then next thing you know,
Right.
it's like everywhere in New York
Everywhere.
City. Yeah. So it was insane.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
In Red Bull, they didn't reinvent the wheel. He was overseas and it was in a tincture and it was pretty much the same ingredients. And again, he was like, this tincture just isn't the right delivery system. He just put it in a carbonated
can. Yeah. And boom.
right? Lil
Yeah.
Wayne was not the first person to say, I'm going to be a rapper or get into hip hop. He just took what was already there and did it different and did it better, what felt right to them.
Yeah.
I don't know Lil Wayne, so I can't speak for him, but I would assume that's about how it started.
Yeah.
So don't try and reinvent the wheel either. There's probably a wheel that's already invented. Most successful companies did not make their own thing. They made an existing thing better.
Yeah, my dad always says, "Don't make something new. Make something 10% new."
Right.
That's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. All right, that's down.
So, one of the questions I always ask is, there's somebody right now, they're listening to this, they're dying a slow death in that cubicle, or maybe they're the ones trimming and they're hating their lives, right? And they want to do something else. What advice would you give them? Because a lot of this audience is built up off of fear. They don't want to make that step because they're fear driven. How would you tell them to make that transition, and how you tell them to face fear?
Yeah, I mean, life's hard, and we get swept up into our day to day. That's why I talk a lot about positivity washing and how much that can set you back. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay to have a bad day. It's okay to not be happy. Let that drive you forward. So when I left the wholesale company, and of course he wanted to drag me through a lawsuit and be tough guy, and I beat it. I beat the pants off of him, but it cost us a ton of money.
Yeah.
And we went from being financially successful to, he was trying to bankrupt us,
Yeah.
which really kind of upset me. So I wrote a note, stuck it on the fridge for my wife and I, and it said, visualize where we'll be a year from now, because this is going to be bad. And you can be as positive as you want, but when you eat peanut butter sandwiches and eggs every day, because that's all you can afford, you can say as many positive things as you want. That sucks.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because we were visualizing where we wanted to be a year from then, and we put in the work to be there. Every single stinking awful day, we made it a little bit better by putting one foot in front of the other for what we wanted a year from then. And once my contract went over and it was dissolved and it was done and he couldn't come after me anymore, I just had a sales call come in.
Okay.
No lie, my phone rang. The two cultivators that I rep right now both called me in the same week and said, hey,
Wow.
where have you been the past year? I said, well, you know where I've been. Yeah, we heard about that. Had a gut feeling that said to call you today. We want you on. And it turned back on like that.
Wow.
Like that.
And that was just because of mind manifestation. Man,
I was just on it. And I had bad days, and I recognized I was having a bad day. And eating peanut butter was, it's not what I wanted to be doing. But we looked ahead and we just kept putting in the work. If you're in a cubicle that you don't like today, you have two choices. You can sit there and stew over how much you don't like it today, or you can sit there and stew over how much you don't like it today and carve out 15 minutes tonight to open a notebook and write yourself a note on where you want to be, start that business plan, Google around for that idea that's in your head. That's your choice.
Yeah.
It's your choice. Tomorrow is going to be just as miserable in your cubicle. I'm not going to lie to you. But what are you wasting that 30, 45 minutes in the evening for by not dedicating it to getting on top of what you actually want? Because a year from now is going to go by.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, what month are we in? It's so hard to tell this year. November of 2021, next year. Yeah. It will be. It's your choice whether you put that 30, 45 minutes in today, tomorrow, the next day, so that next year you're out of that cubicle. That's your choice.
That's such solid advice. I got like a little charged up there. I wanted to like go rip something down. So do you think this is my first last question before we go? Your success in life, do you think it's been mostly because of your hustle or because of luck?
Hustle. I don't believe in luck. I don't, because, you know, I tell people, look at my story, go back through my story and take a snapshot of what it took to get right here on the H for Hustle podcast. And how many times during that struggle would you have used the word lucky? He's lucky to have worked 100 hours this week. He's lucky to have cried himself to sleep again. He's lucky to have only had 55. You wouldn't use that word.
Yeah.
You take the Y off lucky and luck, it's the same word.
Yeah.
It's the same word. It wasn't luck. It wasn't lucky. I was fortunate enough to have the determination to push through the hard times and hustle through it, to have the rewards that are waiting on the other side. I was lucky to have been brought up by parents who encouraged it. But if you take a snapshot over my 10, 11 years story, there's very few times where you would look at it and go, he's lucky today. You might say, hey, he was lucky when he was cashing paychecks that are 15, 20, 30 grand.
But
In the
that was
year
still,
before, I was making
but that
13
still
bucks.
wasn't, but that still wasn't luck because you put in so much years before that
So
to
much.
even get that, to even
So
get a
much.
check like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a wonderful question. I do. But again, that's sign of the times that we live in, where people are like, just stay positive, just say, hey man, sometimes you can't stay positive and you got to accept the negative and work through it, and that's okay. Because if in your head you're just saying just stay positive and you can't, then now you have a negative situation and you're reacting negatively because you can't stay positive. Man, sometimes you just got to eat the mud.
Yeah, and just kind of be in it. And sometimes it's gonna suck. You just got to say that. Actually, I
Yeah.
said that was the last question, but I got one more because you brought this up earlier. Is there books or resources that you use that has helped you in your life that that the audience can maybe go read and maybe can help them as well?
Yeah, John Maxwell is brilliant. He's a secular and non-secular leadership coach, world renowned. 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. I've baked that into every team that I've ever built.
Mm-hmm.
He's brilliant. I've read The Alchemist. I've read the Deepak Chakra. All those fellas. Again, I think it's interesting, but I pull from it lightly. I read I read a lot of Tom Clancy,
Okay.
because although I probably wasn't built for the military, I think it's wonderfully brilliant how coordinated they are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you send out like a SEAL Team 6 and they operate off 3 words: move, shoot, communicate, and how much work and success they can get done with that: move, shoot, communicate. And the whole micro team is tied into that amount of trust
Yeah.
and respect,
Yeah.
that I gobble up books like that, because a small business is mechanical and a small business runs off strict rules and principles with some flexibility around it. But if you can get up, hustle, and be thankful, it's the same thing as move, shoot, communicate. And if you do that over and over and over and over and over and over again, you're probably going to be successful.
Yeah, you sound just like Eli Crane. He was a winner on Shark Tank. His company's called Bottle Breacher. He was on this podcast as well, and he talks about that. He was in Navy SEALs, and he just talks about like transferring some of the Navy SEALs abilities into running his business and how he was able to grow, to like a $20 million company, just
Awesome.
using some of that same techniques that he learned from the Navy SEALs.
Yeah, I
So
love it. I
yeah,
love
so
it.
I mean, thank you so much. If people want to find you, I know you're not on socials like that, but if they want to find you, you want to buy your product, they want to buy high dosage CBD, where should they go?
Yeah, Mountain Made, and that's MADE, mountainmade.life. My bio's up. You can check in, shoot us an email. And then my wholesale company is mpachan, Pachan, mpachanltd.com. I'm all social for a whole year. I get my star charts read every year, and every year the universe assigns me a task to work on for a full year. And this year it was communication, no gossip, backing out of situations that seem to be spiraling out of control, which is 2020. So as much as I would love to be on social thinking I'm giving people guidance, my star chart said I wouldn't be. And in my tikkun, my goal for the year is to be silent, and to be out of the chaos. So as hard as this lesson has been this year, I've been off social since April, and I'll continue to do so until July.
Wow, that's really
That's my
really cool.
gift
That's really cool.
to everyone else this year, is not being in the chaos.
Cool. So not adding to the muck that's already happening.
Yeah,
Mike,
yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you for dropping so much
Thank you,
gems. You
Jerome.
you really motivated me. I feel like every time I do this podcast, I always need to hear something, and every time I speak to someone, I need to hear something. And you definitely said something that I needed to hear. So thank
That's
you so
awesome.
much for that, and I hope that happens to the audience as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time today.
Yeah, thank you all, and thanks to your listeners. I appreciate their time.